Hello. There's so many topics, but I had a couple of people send me messages about seeds. So since everyone's purchasing seeds right now, probably that topic is the best today to go over. So remember that root vegetables, which means a vegetable that's grown underneath the dirt, like beets, radish, carrots, those need to be seeded right into the soil that you're going to want to harvest from. So don't put those in buckets or little squares. Don't start them under lights. Those are the ones you're going to have to put in the dirt directly. And that includes greens, even though that's not a root vegetable. So all your greens, and include celery into that, need to go right into the soil that you're going to harvest from. So if you're using the big 20-gallon planter that I was showing you the other day, and that's where you're going to put everything in the end, make sure you amend your soil, put your soil in there, and spread your seed in that directly. Now, that being said, there's certain times that you can do that. Like, don't spread the seed right now. So in Colorado, depending on where you're at, you want to do probably 2.5 to 3 weeks prior to the last frost that you think might be happening. So to me, if you're in your mind going to plant your other stuff the first week in June, which is the safe one to do. A lot of people do it Mother's Day, but you may have problems. You may actually lose your plants. So be careful. If you're just starting to grow, don't do that. Wait till the first week in June. So what you'll do then is take the first week in June and back it up 2 to 3 weeks, and then spread your seed. Each packet of what you're growing will tell you how far underneath the soil you want to plant it. Remember, surface is better than deeper. So if you're sloppy, which sometimes I get sloppy, not with this, but if you're sloppy and you dig a bunch of holes and you're like 2 to 3 inches down and you throw a seed in that's a green, it's not going to come up. It's going to take a long time to come up if it comes up. It may be the following year. So make sure to read the back of your packet so that you know exactly how far underneath the top layer of soil you need to be. That is so vital. You want your greens to come up when they're supposed to and to have full access to sun. And so you got to make sure the distance from the top of the soil underneath is good. Same with carrots. Got to be careful with carrots. And celery. So those things you want to plant right into your soil. Now, some root vegetables like the cold better than the heat. So be careful with that too. Read about it. Beets and carrots do really well in the summer, but they like cooler temps. So make sure you look at your packaging and study up on it. Take a look at it online. Don't just put it in soil and think it's going to grow. There are some places like Iowa, Nebraska, that you can throw seed in the ground and it grows no matter what. Some of you guys are really fortunate that that can happen, but here it doesn't happen. So I'm just telling you right now, it's not the way it works in Colorado. Number one, our soil is awful. It's full of clay. But number two, the temperatures and all of that, it doesn't work. It doesn't work well at all. So succeed. So take these little things and just try them. You'll succeed. So another thing, there's a difference between watering your plant to keep it cooled down and actually the ambient temperature around your plant. So you can't plant a cold weather vegetable and then think in your mind, well, if it's really hot, I'll just water it more. That's not how it works. Anything that you do to the soil is different than what you do to the plant. So if the temperature of the soil after you water it, it cools the soil off, that's great. But if the ambient temperature for this particular plant isn't cool enough, the plant will die. And it will rot. It'll turn yellow and start to wilt and die. So make sure you understand your warm weather plants, you need to stick with warm weather. Your cold weather plants, you need to stick with cold weather. Now, there are cool weather plants, which are spring and fall. Again, those root vegetables prefer that. And you can grow some root vegetables all winter long in a hoop house that's covered. So keep in mind, watering does not change the temperature of what the plant needs to be planted in. A lot of people get that confused and they're like, well, I'm going to, plant my greens and then I'm going to just water them more, if it's hot. That's not how it works. Greens like cooler temperatures too. Now lettuces, there's a difference between lettuce and a real true green. Lettuces are like romaine and, the lettuce, it looks like water to me. I don't eat them myself because the nutrition value is so much lower than real greens. I'm going to take you in the big greenhouse here in a second and show you. Lettuces can grow in the summer. They still need to be cool and they do need to be watered quite frequently. So lettuce does better in the summer than true greens like kale, spinach, um, chard. Those are the three best things to grow all seasons, but mostly in the winter. Because in the summer they're a little testy. They don't like all the heat. And those you will have to either grow in a covered area in the summer and water quite frequently to get them to be okay, or don't grow them in the summer because you may feel upset about it, or in a shade, or so they need cooler temps, which means you can put them in the shade, but make sure that there's part day sun. They also need sun to grow. So do yourself a favor if you can and try to move from lettuce to real greens, chard, spinach, kale, because the nutrition value is much, much, much higher, right? And if you're eating greens, you want to get that value. You really do. So try to change your taste a little bit around that if you can. Some greens are really bitter. I struggle with bitter greens, so I get it. But I do take some bitter greens and I mix them in with my sweet greens because the bitter greens sometimes have the most nutritional value. They're better for you. So if you can hide them in your sweet greens along with whatever you're putting into your salad, you're going to be so much better off. And you do gain a taste for those eventually. So let's take a look at just a few that I actually planted these greens, October. I threw the seed in, which was too late for winter. But I knew that in the early, January and early spring, that they'd come up. And they've done pretty well. But I plant a lot of different types because the taste is different and you can modify and make something great tasting that might potentially be better. So let's see here. There's my carrots coming up. Beets. So here's Swiss chard. You see this? Now this particular Swiss chard is pretty thick leaved, and the way I plant it nutritionally is thick weeded. Thick weeded also makes it thicker. But anyway, see the weeds in there I need to weed? Haven't done that. Haven't had time. The spinach. Spinach is my favorite. Spinach hates the heat. It will not grow in the summer well at all unless you're in a cool climate. Summer, it really hates the heat. So I only grow it in the winter and in spring, early spring. Already my spinach in the back where the door keeps shut most of the time, it's hot back there during the day. It's already dying back there. So my front spinach is great. Thank goodness. And then here we have see how the leaves are different? Different types of greens. Now these are kales, but they're all different kinds of kales. You see this leaf? This is a semi-sweet kale. This one is slightly sweet, but it has a bitter bottom to it, right? But the color of it gives it a different nutrition value also. Everything color will tell you. Now here's Toscano. A lot of people buy this in the grocery store. Now Toscano is weird because it likes cool weather, but not too cool. And then it hates hot weather. So it's a very short-lived kale most of the time. I have a small greenhouse on the other side that I put a shade cloth over. So I'm able to grow it some in the summer. I get through like June, but when July hits, it doesn't do well. So Toscano is great. High level of nutrition. A lot of people love it because it's a neutral flavor. But again, the times it's going to allow you to grow is different. So again, it's a good idea to do a lot of different greens. I mean, do a lot of different greens so you have options. So you have ones that grow and others don't, so that you have options for flavor, so you have cooking options, like pak choy. Here's pak choy. And now see, look at this. See how it's seeding out? Okay, it's getting too hot for pak choy. Pak choy loves the cold. So it loves cooler weather. It won't last very much longer. It's too hot in here in the hoop house, even with the doors open. See, I've got the one back door open and the front door open. So there's wind that comes through here, cool wind. And I leave the doors open at night unless it gets below 25. And then I shut the back door and leave the front one open. And then if it gets below 19, I shut both, and sometimes I'll cover. So you'll learn all that stuff. You got to learn. Like when to cover, when to not. And you have to babysit it. Look at the weather every day. It's like a full-time job. So the pak choi, I'm going to make something with pak choi tonight. I'm going to make my own sauce with, and probably bake it instead of grill it. But you can grill it with, Asian sauces, and it's delicious. It's amazing. But you only have a certain time of the year that it's going to grow for you. So it's something to choose. If you're going to seed it exactly right now and cover it a little bit, if it's outside, cover it. You may get pak choi before June and July hits. And it's great. It's really great. It's a great green. It doesn't have the same nutrition as other greens. Again, it's also different. So, try to switch over to a nutritional green and do different types. See, different types. Try to do different types. And don't do what I do. Weed. I don't have time, but weed. If you weed, your greens will grow and flourish and be beautiful. My carrots are finally starting to grow over here, and I have to go through. Thing about carrots, after you seed them and they start growing, it's hard to seed carrots perfectly. The seeds are so tiny. I never have time. I'm like throwing them. Okay, this is how I garden. Throw them, and then I have to go back and like prune out all the ones because they're too crowded. They won't grow if they're crowded. So you have to be very careful with that, and weed, which I haven't done over here. I've got patches of carrots everywhere, though. I throw beets and carrots everywhere. So, because here's why. They grow in the spring and in the fall all over the place. And if there's a seed underneath the ground that has not come up, it will come up. It comes up the next year. Sometimes it's the most beautiful thing. You'll have tomatoes growing, and then all of a sudden you'll have a beet appear. And you'll have 3 or 4 more beets. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's hot. Why would these beets come up now? And you get beets all year long in between your growing seasons and in between all kinds of vegetables. It's just beautiful. And I pickle my beets mostly. This year I'm actually going to extract sugar from my sugar beets that I'm going to grow off and on. And I don't have a ton of area, but it's amazing when you have stuff come up. And then sometimes it'll reseed itself and come up on its own. It's just so cool. So I've learned to be more of an organic person and let things grow when they want and come up where they want. I don't pull them. I don't want things to look perfect and beautiful. I want to be able to let things live like they should. So anyway, I don't want to get off on some weird tangent. So that's what I wanted to say about the seeds today and the watering. Temperature matters. Where you plant your seed matters. So we talked about doing the cells and doing the heat mats. You don't need to do that with root vegetables. You don't need to do that with your greens. You can do cabbage that way. It doesn't like to be transplanted, but I've done it. So cabbage takes a while up here to grow. So if you want to do cabbage, number one, it takes up a heck of a lot of room. Like freaking, and if you're doing small garden beds or whatever, it's not the optimal thing for you to choose to grow. But if you want to do it, you can do it in a cell, and it'll give you better growing time if you do. But they freak out when you transplant them. So if you pull them from a cell and you put them in a pot like this, you may lose some, but you can do it. So that's another option for cabbage. So radish, turnips, all that stuff you seed right into the ground. We'll talk more about that. Radish and turnips, they're more of a cold weather type root vegetable. You can do them in the summer, but again, they like cooler weather. So we'll get into that later because right now we're not worried about that since summer's coming. So one more thing I want to say is you do want to learn kind of how to feed your plants. I'm not going to get technical about it. All the numbers, we're not doing that. We might later on talk about like how to measure pH, but all this, I don't want people to get overwhelmed. It's enough to make you lose your mind. We're just going to go over like some companies that have some really good stuff that's easier to use. So there's 2 basic ways you can feed: powders and liquids. Let's just keep it simple. Here's my favorite company for powders. Down to Earth. Right? They smell and they sell. Can you tell how my day's gone already? Smell, right? Anyway, they sell in small boxes like this, or they sell, here we go again. They sell in bags like this. So my favorite one from them that you'll want to have if you want to go this route, that covers so many different vegetables and is easier to do than having to pick 5 different ones for each thing you're growing, is BioLive. It's this one. See it? If you're here locally, you can call Grow It Big and they'll order it for you. They don't have it in stock, but they'll order it for you. It takes 4 days to get it in if it's available in a warehouse. Now, right now, things are really crazy and people are trying to get things, so you may have to wait a little longer for that, but it's worth it. There's 2 ways you can use a powder. You can spread it in your soil, or you can put it in like a bucket with water and let it soak for a while. It gives it quicker usage, right? If you're wanting to do it that way. The other way is the liquids. Now, the liquids are so much easier, and no, I wouldn't say easier. They're more usable because they're ready, right? You put them in water, and then you're going to drench your plant in your soil. And drenching the plant means you literally spray the plant or pour onto the plant the water that has the food in it and the soil, right? And we'll go over that later when we start to do that. So, seedlings, real quickly before I shut my mouth. Seedlings, don't burn them. If you feed them too much, you'll burn them. So you've got to be careful. So if you are new to this, the one thing you can do is when you transplant them into this, you can do a little bit of the powder down to earth. They have one for seedlings. It's called starter mix. Here it is. I'll show it to you. Yeah. And you can actually put that at the root of the plant. So you'll put your dirt in, sprinkle. I just grab a handful, put it in there, put your plant on top of it, put your dirt around it. And then as you water, it slowly starts to trickle out the nutrients. So that's a way to do it. Let's see what else. I think that's probably enough today. Again, you're probably like, enough. So choose your seeds wisely. Try to spread out your taste in greens. Try to really work on that. I know people are like, oh, I don't like that. It tastes gross. It tastes gross to you because it's full of nutrients. You know, it's like eating grass. Yes, but if you've been raised on it, you wouldn't mind it. That's the thing. Your taste can grow to love it. I mean, some people actually do, mustard greens, which I really struggle with. I mean, I grew up in the South, and I can do greens if they're smothered in stuff, and rolled in. I can do them, but otherwise they're so bitter. So people can love bitters. Bitters are good. In Chinese medicine, anything bitter clears heat, which is a good thing. So try green foods. Spread that out. Make sure to remember you don't have to plant your greens or your root vegetables in the trays. You can put those directly in the dirt. Talked about the timing, talked about water versus temperature. So, okay, so hopefully that's enough for today, and then I'll do another tomorrow on another subject. Okay, see you guys soon.